everybody, and welcome to the podcast.
The podcast Beach Theory.
I shall be a professional.
So today we are going to be in season 2. We're going to be talking about our childhood. And I want to tell you guys about
your hobbies.
Not my hobbies, my favorite books that
okay.
When I was a teenager, I had this I think I wasn't allowed to play video games uncontrollably, and I couldn't just watch TV or whatever whenever I wanted to. And so I found very quickly that I could read as much books as I wanted. And so because I was allowed free reign of reading, I became quite the reader. I had a lot of books that I would read, and I thought it might be fun to talk about some of my favorite books.
Okay.
Did you ever read any books when you were a teenager?
I've never really been a big reader. Mostly, as a kid, it was hard. I struggled learning to read, and then once I did learn to read, it wasn't really fun for me. I could see other people reading, and I was like, why do you even think that's fun?
What kind of weirdo likes reading?
It just confused me because I could not relate. Yeah. And then, but when I got into high school, and after the witchcraft craze of saying Harry Potter was evil died down a little bit, then finally we read Harry Potter.
I don't remember ever hearing that Harry Potter was evil.
You lived in Florida. I lived in Utah. That's the difference.
Okay. All right.
Because I remember when it first came out, everybody was like, this is a very bad book. It's all about witchcraft and making it cool and all this stuff. And lots of people had that opinion. And then eventually they were like, Harry Potter's so cool. And now look at me.
Did you read all the Harry Potter books?
Actually, okay, so I don't think I read the last couple because it got really dark. Dark enough for me to be like, if I can't read this at night and fall asleep easily, then I feel like I'm inviting a bad spirit, and I don't want to. But I did read all the other ones. I know I read probably up till 5.
Okay.
But I've seen all the movies multiple times, so it's I don't know, it's different when you're I think reading a book, you bring that feeling for a lot longer because it takes longer to read a book than a movie. So for some reason, I'm okay with watching the movies, even though they're creepy, when the books, yeah.
That's
anyways.
Funny.
But it was enough that we loved it enough that we went to the midnight release of every book after.
Of every movie?
2.
Where did you go to the midnight release of the book?
The book.
I didn't know there were midnight releases.
There were midnight releases of the book at our little Walmart where we lived down in Ephraim.
Really?
And we would go and we were like, the next book is coming out. We were all go. We're all these teenagers and just waiting in line. And then I think I just remember a big pallet that was only books, and they unwrapped it, and then everybody was grabbing the books.
I do remember. All my friends were reading Harry Potter when I think the 4th book came out.
Okay.
Or the 5th book, one of those two.
Yeah.
And I was like, everybody's reading this, I'm going to read it. So I read the first 4 books, and it didn't really, none of them really caught my attention.
Your fancy.
I never was oh, Harry Potter. It was more of a well, everybody's reading these, so I better read them. And I read the first 3 or 4, and everyone's like, keep going, they get better. And I was like, okay. So I read half of the 5th, and I just got bored halfway through the book, and I quit reading. I think that who writes those? J.K. Rowling. I think that right around the time that 3 was done, they became a sensation.
Yeah.
So she started writing them longer. And if you notice, the books get considerably longer after book 3. And I think because she was making them longer, she was filling them with more fluff to try to get more readers, I guess. And so that didn't appeal to me. I was already not really keeping my interest.
I think you just didn't like her as an author. You know how, sometimes when you read a book, you'll find an author that you're I will read anything they put out because I love the way they write.
That is true.
I think that she probably just didn't.
She didn't do it for me.
Click with you.
Yeah. And I read a lot of other books.
Because I really like the way that she writes. But I didn't like the dark feeling is all.
It could be I didn't like the way that she writes. It also could be that I didn't really relate to any of the characters.
You were older than me. I was their age. Like, especially once the movie came out, I was like, oh my goodness, they're my age. I want to read the books.
Oh yeah, I was probably like 15, and here I am reading a book about an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
But I guess that didn't affect me so I read there was another book series that I really liked that I actually have read many, many times. It's called The Tennis Shoes Among the Nephites series.
Okay.
And I guess
so good.
I was like, actually, I think I was 12 when I read the first book, and the kids in the book are like 12.
Wait, which one are you talking
Tennis
about?
Shoes Among the Nephites. But then going back and rereading those books, I think just because I did read it when I was younger, it was fun for me.
It was like nostalgic and you wanted to keep reading.
But those characters in the subsequent books grow up and become adults and have their own kids. And at any age in my teenage years, I enjoyed the stories. It really spoke to me, and I loved all the characters. I loved the adventures they went on. And that is, I think if I had to pick one book series that's like my favorite.
That you wouldn't want to go without? That
I could easily read over and over and over and over again.
And he has.
It's those ones. And actually, we haven't read those for like 10 years.
I know. Okay, so
it was when we were first married.
Before we were married, you had read through them like twice.
Yes.
And then once we got married, I remember staying up every night. So I was pregnant with James, and we were living in a little house in Mount Pleasant, Utah, and you had we were both going to school, but I think eventually I dropped out because I was pregnant and just horribly sick and couldn't keep going. But I remember staying up late, and it was in this house that was very cold. Like, it was a not well insulated house at all,
and we didn't have money for the heater bill.
Yeah, so we got wood from my parents, and there was a fireplace, thankfully, and we had like this futon that was right by the fireplace, so we would stoke up the fire and we'd pour ourselves some Cocoa Puffs cereal. At least that's the kind I remember eating. I think you were eating Reese's Puffs because you love those. Oh, yeah. And Captain Crunch. Peanut butter crunch.
Oh, yeah. Peanut butter crunch.
I remember, I remember this because I was pregnant. Honestly, that's how because I was like, I love this food right now.
Food memories from being pregnant.
And then we would just sit there and read Tennis Shoes Among the Nephites. And it was so good. I read that
whole series to you.
Yeah.
Over a period of just a few months. And there's like 10 books.
There's so many books, but they're so good. Like, the author is so good. If there's ever a book, in my opinion, right? This is our theory, right? But if there's ever a book that you like find an author that you really, really, really love, you should totally try writing in that style, because you did that actually. I think that's a cool idea to try. You did that for a while, and you have somewhat of a book written.
I did write somewhat of a book before my mission.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager.
And like one day you're like, I wrote this book, you have to read it. So I read it, and it was like maybe one chapter. Maybe. But it was written in the same style as like his favorite author, which is Chris Heimerdinger. It was good.
When I was a teenager and I was reading tons of books all the time, I think I started having a passion, and I wanted to write.
Yeah.
I wanted to write books and stories, and so I did. So I was like, I really want to learn how to type. Using is that a keyboard? Is that what that's called? Yeah. It's called a keyboard. I was like, I want to learn how to type on a keyboard, and I want to be fast. And so when I was a teenager, we had like these fun games. There was one where it was like, it would have a letter on the screen, and you type that letter, and then the little character would walk across the screen. And then the letters would get faster. And it was like S-A, 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 F, S-A, S-A. And that's how you kind of like learn where the keys are.
Okay, what is this program? We need this for our kids
I know, right? Well,
keyboard typing games. We need to look
there are some. Yeah. I've actually looked them up. But in all reality, what really helped me to learn typing was writing my book. So I had it written out, just like handwritten, and I had like 50 pages of this book. And maybe this is a book you haven't read, because I had way more than one chapter.
No, I read it. I remember. I read it.
I had 50 pages of this book.
I read it.
There's multiple chapters. In fact,
Okay.
actually, I think I've finished the whole book now that I am thinking back on my memory.
You keep
Was it
thinking
about an
that.
ant
Just kidding.
and a raccoon and a dragon?
I remember a teenager. I remember pizza.
That's a way different book.
Okay.
That's a way different
What
one.
is it?
The one I'm telling you about was when I was younger. I read a different book, and it was like
yeah,
a full-on,
why is this
like,
like...
really big story adventure.
What age were you when you wrote that?
Oh, probably 13.
This is one of those times where we need it to read it right now.
I have no idea where it is, but I took that story and I had it all written out, and I had my fingers on the keyboard, and I would like type out each letter as I was writing the story on the computer.
Okay.
And just that practice of like typing over and over again the actual words, not just like random S-A-S-A-S-A, but like actual words practice. It got to the point where by the time I was done, I could type really quick.
That's cool.
And as of right now, I think I can type like 60 words per minute.
That's awesome.
Which is not super fast, but it's not that bad either.
No, it does what you need it to. Like you're not a secretary or anything, you know. Like it's okay. You're totally fine with that.
But I think the first book that I read that was like an actual real book was when I was 11, and it was The Secret of Nim.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I've seen that cartoon.
And
I never read the book though.
I don't know if I ever watched the cartoon. Maybe I have.
Yeah, I think you've seen it. I think I showed it to you once.
But I remember the book. The only thing I remember about the book was that there was like this cinder block that was partially underground, and that's where the mice lived.
Oh yeah.
And then this woman had to go to the rats, and I don't remember much else about it.
Ask for something to save her husband who is sick. Medicine.
Yeah.
I need medicine.
Yeah, it was. That was a good book,
I'm remembering the cartoon.
But that was the first book I ever read that was like not a picture book, like
Yeah.
not a little kid's book.
You know, Corbin right now is in a hard, like, little section of life where he's young enough that he really wants the pictures, but he's old enough, or he's smart enough that like he's reading faster than Michael. Like
He'll read over my shoulder, and I'll be reading a paragraph, and he'll finish the paragraph before I do.
yeah,
Almost every single time.
yeah.
The only problem is his comprehension's not
Yeah.
quite there.
But the thing is, like, he's in this weird spot where he wants the pictures, but he is reading at a higher level where the pictures aren't anymore. So then he's like dumbed down by the books he wants to read, but he doesn't actually want to read the books that are like his level. It's so weird. It's
Yeah,
weird.
it's kind
He'll
of
get there.
He will, and I think as his vocabulary improves,
Mm-hmm.
his comprehension will improve.
Yeah.
And then his appreciation for those more older books will improve too.
Oh yeah. I think honestly, what if we like slipped in tennis shoes among the Nephites to like under his pillow or something?
Well, here's the thing.
Like if he
When we
starts
read
reading
Tennis
that-
Shoes Among the Nephites, I enjoyed reading it with you. And
Oh,
I
I
remember
did
saying,
too.
I want to read these books again
When our kids can
are old
understand
enough
it.
to
Yep.
appreciate them.
I
So
remember that.
I have patiently waited for 10 years for our kids to finally be old enough where I think they would actually really enjoy the
Oh,
stories.
I think they would too. I think they would love it.
So I've been waiting for this day, and I'm not going to let them read them on their own.
Okay,
I want to read them
okay.
because I enjoy reading them
Yep.
too, because they're so fun.
They're so good.
So that was the first book I read. And then after the Tennis Shoes series, there was another book series that one of my friends introduced me to called Dragonlance.
Oh yeah.
And I read all the Dragonlance Chronicles by Margaret Wise and
See,
Tracy
that's
Hickman.
the one we should sneak into Corbin.
Those are even more advanced than Tennis
Really?
Shoes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the Dragonlance books are really fun. It's like a dragons and elves and dwarves, and they go on this adventure, and there's magic and wizards. And I really, really loved that series. I think that was one that I read when I was like more like 16, 17 years old, a little bit older. Because they're just like these thick fantasy novels that are not meant for young audiences at all. They're literally like teen, young adult audience.
Yeah.
And so kids wouldn't
We
appreciate
just
it.
need to find more books that Corbin can read. That's all I'm thinking right now. I'm like, okay, we need to find more. And coronavirus has shut down the libraries.
I know. Well, a lot of books are available online.
I know.
But, what I was going to say was that story that you read that was like one chapter,
Uh-huh.
that was actually more inspired by Dragonlance than Tennis Shoes.
Okay.
Because it was about these boys.
I had read Tennis Shoes with you, and then we moved to Florida, and that's where I read it for the first time that you showed it to me, and I remember thinking this sounds exactly like Chris Heimerdinger.
I think the writing style was like Chris
Yes.
Heimerdinger, but I think the actual like content story
yeah.
was more along the lines. Yeah,
Okay.
because I really liked the writing style of Tennis Shoes among the Nephites,
Yeah.
because it's a little bit more like a little younger, a little more conversation, adventure, like descriptive. But Dragonlance is like super descriptive. Like you'll have an entire page and it's just describing the energy in the place, which in a way is really cool to visualize it.
Yeah.
The cool descriptive is really fun, but not as much of the conversation and the almost like juvenile conversations that they have like in Tennis Shoes.
Okay. I'm like, as you're talking, I'm like, why don't I like reading so much? What is my problem?
What's
you know,
wrong
like,
with you?
what is going on? But I think the reason why is because, you know, I grew up with 8 other siblings, and like the house was always small and very loud, and I remember
That's why I do like reading so much. I would escape in my bedroom and read books. My mom would come in my room and take the books out of my room and hide them in her dresser drawer because
you got
I was
in trouble from not doing anything.
I was neglecting the responsibilities around the house.
That's funny. Oh, that's a big one.
Oh.
See, reading makes me tired. Just kidding. No, I think because it was so like I have FOMO. You know, if I'm not like in the middle of what's going on all the time with the like at home, I feel like I'm missing out really bad. And I don't want to miss out. I've always been like that.
I think the difference was the culture of your family life.
Yes.
Like at your home as a teenager, like there's probably a lot more fun or interesting things going on.
There were.
Versus at my house as a teenager where it was like work.
Yeah.
Like I always had chores that I was supposed to be doing that I wasn't doing, that I was trying to avoid doing. Or some kids that I had to
we
help
had that
babysit.
too, but I do think my mom was like, let's do a special project. Like there was, I can guarantee there was always at least one big project going on. Like we were planting a garden, or we were like making Jerusalem in our living room, or we were turning our house into a saloon. Like seriously, we did all these things. And so it was, I mean, sitting there and reading a book when I hear all these weird things happening and people laughing hysterically, I'm like, I can't do this. I need to go find out what's going on. That's why I couldn't do my homework too.
We might have had projects going on, but I don't remember anybody laughing hysterically.
Like the adults
It
were
was more
laughing
of
hysterically
More
wherever.
of a whip being cracked.
Stop. Your mom's going to hear this. She's going to be like, you're making me sound bad. Love you.
That's true. She does listen. But in all reality, like that's my memory. Like if we were playing, we were usually being sneaky.
You know, see, here's the thing though. You got reading because of that.
I did.
I didn't because of that. So like it's just, you know, there's pros and cons to it all. Like it really just depends on how positively we want to look at it, because I could look at yours and be like, wow, you got to read so much. And you could look at mine and be like, wow, you got to have fun with your family so much. I don't know, you know, like there's different positive ways of looking at it.
I guess that's true. I never thought of it that way.
Because in my family, wouldn't have been reading as much. Or maybe
True.
you could have been. I guess there was a lot of places to run and hide. But like, I just couldn't do it because I had FOMO.
I think I'd gotten really good
Fear
at
of
reading.
missing out, just in case.
In case you don't know what FOMO means. I got really good at reading, and I really enjoyed reading, that I started reading other books that were non-fiction. Like that were not just adventure books.
That really that was something that always confused me as a kid. Non-fiction versus fiction. I was like,
fiction is fake. Non-fiction is
and
not
I
fake.
always thought it was the opposite. Always.
You thought fiction was like real stories of
Yes.
life?
And then non-fiction means like not real. Wait. See, I'm confused. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The face you made me like, wait, did I say that the opposite of
just misunderstood it. I comprehended it the wrong way. I was like, what? No, you're right.
That's funny.
But yeah, anyway, I was like, well, I want to learn some stuff. I can't remember the first nonfiction. Oh, you know what it was? So
Rich Dad Poor Dad.
I think Rich Dad Poor Dad might have been the first one.
Because
it was like I was reading these stories, right, of these fancy adventures and fantasy and stuff. And then I was like, I want to read something that's like more
productive.
Honestly, I think I was just looking for another book to read.
Yeah.
And I wasn't looking for something specifically nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
But I found a book, well, actually, because Tennis Shoes Among the Nephites is actually based on stories from the Book of Mormon, which is true stories, nonfiction. And so I was like,
that's so confusing.
It's historical fiction, but it's based on historical actual events.
Yeah.
And so then soon after that, I read the Rockwell Chronicles.
Oh, I love those ones. We read those ones together too. And I think that one I love more than Tennis Shoes.
Really? Okay.
I want to read that one again.
We should read that one again.
That one was so good.
So the Rockwell Chronicles is about a figure in the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he was the bodyguard for Joseph Smith. And it's a 4-book series that basically takes the historical facts about his life and adds a little bit of story around it to help kind of make it feel more like you're actually there, getting to know him as a character.
So it's like the main things are true.
The main things are true. Maybe some of the side conversations and little things on the side are just added to help make the character be more
and
relatable.
It's cool because after we read all that, we went and a little while ago filmed a video in Eureka, a ghost town here in Utah. And they had Porter Rockwell's cabin there. And it was like so exciting because we were there filming at night a metal detecting video. And the metal detecting video, we got out in this like, there was a parking lot by a gas station and it had this little brown cabin in like, we just got out and we were all looking around and we're doing our metal detecting video. And all of a sudden I look up and there's this sign that's like Porter Rockwell's cabin. And I was like, what? I was like, Michael, you have to come see this, because he was in the car with Max. Max was really little, and he came out. He's like, "This is Porter Rockwell's cabin." We were like freaking out, fangirling this cabin.
Well, Charlie's
so exciting.
Charlie's middle name is Porter after Porter Rockwell.
Yeah.
But I fell in love with like the idea of like, this is a true person, like a real thing that happened in history. And so then I actually went to the library and there was a whole bunch of books that I read that were like historical fictions about like real history events, and they would have like a made-up character going through those real historic events. The made-up character perspective.
Okay.
So it kind of brought history to life for me in a really fun way.
What were those books?
I can't remember what they were called.
We need those
but they were
books.
like little short stories.
Okay.
It was like about a kid in the Holocaust, or a little Native American girl, or like different people in different time periods living in different cultures.
That sounds familiar to me. I know with the Holocaust, there's a lot of those though,
right.
Like where there's so many stories from.
But
there.
it wasn't an actual person.
Okay.
It was like a historical event that was real, and then they added in
brought it to life with a character,
a fictional character living out those true historical events.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
That's
it was
really interesting.
It was cool,
We
and
need
so
to find those too. We need to get the keyboard typing app or whatever.
I like reading a lot.
Also, I figured out something.
Huh.
I feel like super unproductive. I pretty much, when I read, feel almost as bad as when I play video games. Like when I play video games, I just feel like I'm wasting my life.
What about when you watch TV?
I enjoy that so much.
You don't feel like you're wasting your time when you're watching
Not
TV?
as much. Like it's like I enjoy it way more than if I.
That's so strange.
But
to me.
if I feel the same way when I'm reading books. I feel like I'm wasting my life unless it's a self-help book, and then I love it. Like, and I've only discovered this since I've been an adult, where I'm like, okay, I really want to read a book. What can I read? If I want to read something, I have to, like, I find a really good self-help book, and then I mostly, even when it's still a self-help book and I feel like I'm being productive, I still have to do it like audiobook style, because then I can get other things done while I do it. Like, I just feel so unproductive when I read.
Well, it was about that time that my mom was like, here's a really good book. It's got a really good story. It's about a boy and his friend, and they grow up, and the boy's friend is really, really like a good business, or like really, really good businessman, and the boy's dad. Anyway, and I was like, oh, that sounds like an interesting story. So I read this story, and it's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
But it's really cool because he teaches like investing principles and how to make money and how the rich think. But he teaches it in the stories of his youth, of his childhood as he was growing up. And so it doesn't feel like you're just reading a self-help book. It feels like you're reading a story. And so I was like, wow, this is a really good story. And I learned a lot reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And
I remember from that book, I'm pretty sure it's from that book, the story of the little boy who had a fruit stand. And he was like, I'm going to make so much money selling fruit on the beach or whatever. And then his dad's like, okay, but don't come back until everything is sold. And he's like, okay. And it was like the end of the day, and he was so close. He only had like a little bit of fruit left, and it wasn't sold yet. And he was like dying. And then the dad like hired somebody, gave somebody some money and said, go buy the rest of that fruit. And he bought the rest of the fruit, and the boy came home and was like, Dad, I sold all the fruit.
I don't remember that.
That was the only thing I remember.
Have you read that book?
I think you were reading it to me for a minute.
Okay.
And I don't remember finishing it though.
Okay. And so I read that, and then I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like, it taught me about investing in business. And then I read one of Rich Dad, Poor Dad's like advisors, like team members, wrote a book called Real Estate Riches. So I read Real Estate Riches, which was more from the perspective of like, this is how you invest, this is what you look for. And so when I was probably 16 or 17 years old, I read a book about real estate investing, and it was like everything I was reading, I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, I can make money, and it just helped fuel the fire of my entrepreneurial spirit.
He's always been somebody who's like, I don't want to have anybody else be a boss over me. And he's always, from the minute I met him, like, I asked him, like, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? What do you want to be? And he's like, I want to be a beekeeper. I want to be like an industrial, no, what is it? Beekeeper, where you have commercial beekeeper. And I want to own my own business, and I want to own real estate. Like, he had all these grand plans, and I was like, that's really good. I have nothing. I want to be a mom one day. That's all. So match me in heaven, right?
That's right.
Isn't it cool? Think about it. We've done it.
Mm-hmm.
We've done the things you planned.
Mm-hmm.
Other than industrial, what is it?
Commercial
beekeeper. I keep saying that.
Industrial
beekeeper. Other than commercial beekeeper, which we've found, you did more research, and it was a lot more work than you were wanting to do.
I think that my experience in Florida as a beekeeper was much different than my experience in Utah as a beekeeper.
Yeah.
And so, like, as a teenager, I was well on my way to becoming a commercial beekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
I went from one beehive, and then by the time I left on mission, I had 10 active beehives.
Oh my goodness.
And they were all doing great.
That makes me sick, only because all of it got given away on your mission. I still feel bad about that.
I know, but beekeeping in Utah is not nearly as easy as it was back home in Florida. But anyway, so yeah, I just read a whole bunch of books. I read 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. That was a really good book.
See that?
That's a self-help book.
I don't know why. Some self-help books, I see the cover and I'm like, that looks like the most boring book I've ever seen in my life.
It has
and that's
denim on the cover. It has denim on the cover.
Denim's not that cool.
It was when I was a teenager.
Oh, leggings. Now that's nice. Just kidding.
There's a few other books I read. But
wait. Tell me more about that last one.
7 Habits?
Yeah.
It was like, be proactive, think win-win, begin with the end in mind. Okay. It was all the same habits as in Stephen Covey's. So Stephen Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yes.
And his son Sean Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens.
Okay.
It's the same 7 habits, but it's more from like a teen perspective.
Okay.
Right? Like, what kinds of things are teens dealing with that they need these 7 habits to help them be more effective?
Because I actually was given that book.
Oh.
When I went to I had to meet with the counselor in high school. Like, because I think we all had to at one point or another. And they were like, okay, go meet with the counselor. So I went and met with the counselor, and I was just, I think all times I ever met with counselors, they were like, how come you have such a hard time doing your homework? And I was just like, I don't know.
Because
when
my
in
family's
reality,
making Sarah Hamill in my living room.
when in reality, now I know, it's because I had a very loud at-home life that was fun and more interesting than homework, and I never wanted to do homework because of it. But every teacher always was like, what's going on at home? Like, there was this horrible thing. It wasn't. It was just more exciting than homework. And that was one of those times. He's like, okay, I think you should read this book, but will you promise me you'll read it? And I was like, and he's like, no, I want you to promise you're going to read it. And I was like, I guess so. And he's like, okay, here's this book. It's very special. He gave it to me, and I never read it.
Did you even try?
No.
Did you even open the cover?
I probably opened it and then went,
boring.
I don't want to read this. This is boring. Honestly, you take somebody who has so much homework and so much fun at home, and you give them more homework. That's not going to help you.
Give them a boring book. No, I really like that book, actually. And even still today, a lot of the principles that I learned in that book, I still do. That's probably why I'm more effective than you are.
Probably. I work so differently than you.
And that's okay, because in all reality, the things that you can do are so different than anything I could ever do.
Like, we totally complement each other. We're just not, we don't work the same way.
You have different skills and different abilities than I do.
Yeah.
And that, it just is what it is.
And it's funny, though, because I feel like because of that, we work. Like, YouTube works for us, and everything that we do works. Like, I am much more creative and spastic and not, like, planned, and you're like...
Which is good. That's a good thing. I'm not good at that.
And you, like, plan things
more
and you calculate and very analytical, and I'm not like that. I think both of us have gotten more like each other over the years. Like, not so rigidly like how we were.
But we also know what each other's strengths and weaknesses are.
And some of things I never do. Because I know that he will do a better job, and it will take him 10 times less time because it comes to him naturally, where same thing vice versa with me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's it. And then, on my mission, I read Jesus the Christ. That's a really good book that I really want to read again. And here's my problem. Like, since I was a kid, reading to me was like an escape as when I was a child or a teenager. It was like, my life is crazy. Like, I don't want to do all this work. I'm going to go escape to my bedroom, and the only option I have is to read. So I read and read and read. And now in my life, it's like, my life is great. I have everything that I want. I can do whatever I want. And so, I'm not interested in reading. Yeah. It's like, it doesn't have the same appeal to me because...
I need to ask you to do more work.
You're not in charge of me.
I'm going to make you do it.
You don't scare me.
Oh yeah. Just kidding.
You don't. You're way not scary.
Michael, I have never... You were so rude. I could be scary. I could... Stop laughing!
You're like the least scary person ever.
I have scared you sometimes. When I get... What's the most mad you've ever seen me?
But not at me.
Really?
You might get mad at the kids.
Oh, that's true. I've gotten really mad at the kids, and I've gotten really mad at Andrew once. Well, lots of times growing up. But...
And usually when you get that mad, I'm like, that's right. Yeah, you tell him, Becca. That's right.
I know I've gotten mad at you before.
Not like to the point of scaring me.
You say that now, but during... I remember you shivering and shaking.
My dear, my sweet, sweet dear, you don't have the same control over me that my mom did. If my mom grounded me and my dad enforced it, there was no way around it.
Oh, man.
And I can sweet talk you into anything.
Oh, yeah, right. You're making me seem less scary to them. I don't know why I want to see. I know. My whole life. My whole life, I have been judged as the blonde, dumb girl that doesn't have like anything real to say and is just like easily excused, like easily looked over. And it has frustrated me, like to a point where like,
want to be perceived as?
Well, that's the thing. Like,
you want to be.
I don't want people to think I'm dumb.
No one thinks you're dumb.
But that is the cliche with the blonde girl.
But your whole argument against me right now is that I don't find you scary. There's a difference between dumb.
But that also means to me, and maybe this is just all in my head, so let's talk it through, but that you don't take me seriously. Like, for some reason, those seem the same to me.
Maybe that is the difference. I do respect what you say, and so therefore I want to make you happy, and I will proactively go out of my way to please you, versus as a teenager, when my mom would tell me what to do, I would intentionally try to avoid her instructions. Like, I would go out of my way to hide from her rather than being like, what can I do for you? That's the difference.
Okay, that's good to know.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
I think
and
if I was trying to hide from you and I didn't want to make you happy and I wanted you to be like grumpy all the time, then I'd probably be like, oh no, it's Becca, I'm going to go hide in my man cave. But like, we just don't have that kind of relationship.
Yeah. That's probably a good thing.
I think it's a great thing. But because of that, I don't read anymore.
Because you don't need to read.
I don't need that escape anymore.
Okay, well.
No.
That's good, I guess.
Here's the thing.
No, you better make sure your mom feels good.
As a teenager, I couldn't just play video games whenever I wanted to. I couldn't just watch whatever cartoons I wanted to. We didn't have Netflix, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if my mom caught me playing video games, she'd get to work, right? You got jobs to do. Well, now, if I want to play video games, I just play video games. And so if I have to choose, like as a teenager, I totally would have chose video games, but I didn't have that choice. So I read books, choice. Right?
Yeah.
That was more tolerated.
That makes sense.
But as an adult, now I'm like, books, movies. I'm going to watch movies or play video games.
I think I'm a very visual person too.
Mm-hmm.
Like Corbin, I get frustrated when there's not pictures to look at. And I know that seems like, oh, you get over that when you're an adult. But no, I don't. I like pictures.
I got over that.
And so, but that's why I like movies. Because it's a visual and an audio. Like it's both. So it just makes me, it's more fulfilling to me. It's more entertaining to me. I just overall like it a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
Let me know what your guys' favorite books are. I'm curious to know if you guys have read the Tennis Shoes books or Porter Rockwell or Dragonlance. Like, or Rich Dad Poor Dad? What self-help books have you read?
Also, wait, I have to say something else, and it has nothing to do with what you were talking about. Just barely.
You have to keep it on topic.
No, I don't. Yes, anyways.
If you don't, that means you don't fear me.
Well, I definitely don't fear you. So anyways.
I want to be feared. Just like you want to be feared.
Well, here's the thing. I remember a lot of people, if you don't know things, they'll just make fun of you. You know, like they'll just laugh in your face and be like, oh, you don't know that. Well, that happened to me all the time when I was a teenager with specifically bad things, like because I was very sheltered and I didn't want to see bad things. But just the fact of being made fun of for not knowing those things, that made me want to know them. And so that I could be like, I know what you're talking about. And they'd be like, whoa, she knows that. And then I'd be like, that's right. But now I'm like, oh no, I've gotten past that. I don't need to know everything bad in the world for people to respect me. You know, it's weird. Anyways, I had to explain more of that thought. Now we can close it.
Go ahead.
All right, bye.